And I would love to introduce you to Mistress Uta Fellhammer, who is the presenter for this session.
Hi, I'm Ute Fallhammer, and I'm going to talk about why the SCA does not need white supremacy in it, and offer some opportunity for discussion. And I would like to end with some problem solving. I didn't want this to become just a place where I'm lecturing. I didn't want it to be a place where we just got together and talked about everybody who we feel like has really been rude and shitty. I want it to be a place where we talk about how we've interacted so far that has not been successful, and how we're gonna go forward as a group and talk about the things that we do want to make a part of our everyday experience in SCA, and how you deal with people who are not necessarily on board with your choices. So I'm just going to get started. And I'm going to read from my notes at first. I've been trying to think about what to do with this class. And my goal was to create a place where we could come together and talk about how to move forward and change the slow drift that I felt like seemed very obvious to me during the beginning of the pandemic and the lockdown. And a lot of really nasty and unproductive conversations took place online. And for some people forever changed how they feel about the SCA. And for me, it was very hard, mostly because this place has been my haven since I was really young, where I got to be the nerdy poetry writing painter that I wanted to be. And then suddenly, for the very first time, I didn't feel safe. And a lot of that has to do with my ethnic background is that I'm a Ukrainian Jew, and having arguments over whether or not it's okay to have anything that looks like a swastika is a hard place to be in the 21st century, in a place that you got involved with because there were geeks singing filk originally. That was how I got here. So I wanted to turn back and take a look at who we have been and why the adoption of any kind of ideology that discriminates based on anything really, but race, gender, religious choice, religions that you were born into, being extremely ableist or unable to allow other people to participate to the best of their abilities in the places that inspire them is just not only no use to us, but has no place here. And historically for the SCA has not been something that we saw in the way we started to see it in the last few years. And I want to make sure that as we go forward, we leave behind an SCA that I not only would recognize, but would be proud of. And every once in a while we do something amazing. And I think to myself, this is why I'm here. And then I'll read something, and it's frequently online, that makes me never want to come back. So that's what I wanted to talk about. All of the ideologies that take a stance that is negative about sex or gender, ableist discrimination, beliefs, all of that, I feel like it destroys a feeling of safety and community, which is what brought us all together in the first place. And for many, the SCA was a place where they could gather and express the best parts of themselves, feel safe to express it, to use their chosen arts and sciences, and to be free of discrimination and all forms of discrimination, poisonous blossoming that we have when we're together, this agreed upon reality that we've all worked on. So I feel like today we can share experiences and fears that make us hesitant to stand up and say something when something happens that we feel is obviously not okay. I want to also make it a space where we can give each other that safety and encourage each other, and to know that you're not alone if you find something that you feel like should be reported, or just say out loud, this is fundamentally not right, and I don't want to be here when we're talking like that. So I just feel like those places, those beliefs are things that break things down. And what we want to do and what we have done is we've built something beautiful, and I want to keep it. So one of the enduring arguments that I kept on seeing being made and is still made constantly is uh, that if you make a rule that you're not allowed to use a swastika on your shield, or uh, talk about uh, sexist ways women were treated in history, or the slaying of large numbers of people who were of a different color based on a war that was part of European history, but really doesn't help us in the SCA in any way, and we don't do anything to reenact that sort of thing. That if we're not allowing people to talk about it, that we are by nature not actually inclusive, where we've become hypocrites because we're slowing down someone else's ability to express themselves, even if what they're expressing is a lack of belief in someone else's humanity. And I think that that for me is really the hardest part of all of this. I feel that frequently I get told that it's politics, that what we're talking about is politics. If we didn't like what someone said, or if someone posted something that was by its nature profoundly discriminatory and potentially inflaming and also hurtful, that what we were now engaging in was politics, and that there's no place for that in the SCA. And I would say that the nature of politics is that it's about governance, and that things that don't accept the humanity of half the population, it's not a form of governance. That's a totally different thing, because when we're governing and everyone has an equal place at the table, we are open to all forms of communication, and we are also able to what is the word? I suddenly just blocked myself out. When you come to an agreement with somebody because you've negotiated over it, it is called, please feel free to shout it out.
Social contract?
Well, there is a social contract, but literally the idea that we're going to exchange ideas and then come to a common place in the middle is negotiation. The idea that negotiation is a bad thing, that everybody has to be all or nothing, and that we're not going to discuss anything. The only people who get to negotiate are people with a seat at a table. And if you're not technically a person to the guy sitting across from you, then there's no room for negotiation. And that to me, politics and governance is about how we get things done as human beings interacting with each other. If you choose a belief system that doesn't believe that half the population is actually a human, then you don't have to bother listening to them or taking care of them or taking their feelings into view, or even whether or not they have a right to live. And that is the exact opposite of what brought us together for the SCA to begin with. So in the spirit of how we got started, that argument enrages me. And I knew that lots of philosophers had covered this, and that Plato even had something to say about that initial argument, that if you're not willing to give time and energy to people who don't believe you are allowed to exist, that you're actually a hypocrite. And I found Carl Raymond Popper, who was a 20th century into the 21st century philosopher with a huge amount of awards and quotations, and people who believed that he was 100% right. And this is actually based on an earlier series of discussions by Plato, but unlimited tolerance leads to the disappearance of tolerance. If we extend unlimited tolerance to those who would be intolerant, we are not prepared, and we are not prepared to defend a tolerant society against the onslaught of intolerance, then the tolerant will be destroyed, and all tolerance with them. This formulation, I do not imply, for instance, that we should always suppress the utterance of intolerant philosophies, as long as we can counter them with rational argument and keep them in check with public opinion. Suppression would certainly be unwise, but we should claim the right to suppress them if necessary, even by force, for it may easily turn out that they are not prepared to meet us on the level ground of rational argument. But begin by denunciation of all argument, that they then will forbid their followers to listen to rational argument, because it is deceptive, and teach them to answer arguments by use of fists or pistols. We should therefore claim, in the name of tolerance, the right not to tolerate intolerance. We should claim that any movement preaching intolerance places itself outside the law. We should consider the incitement to intolerance as the persecution of a criminal, in the same way we would consider the incitement to murder, kidnapping, or the revival of slave trade as criminal. And I feel that this is a valid argument, and that there is no way to build a social contract if you cannot trust that once an agreement is met, that we are all going to keep going by that agreement. A lack of humanity means that there is no contract. You can say whatever you want to a cart horse or a dog, and I would think the less of you for being cruel to them, but nobody goes to jail for that. So, in the interest of building a place where we can go forward and imbibe in all of the arts and the sciences and our competitions, and even in just the comfort of our social gatherings amongst like-minded people, the social contract demands that we can communicate and go forward with negotiations. And that does not happen with somebody who doesn't recognize your humanity. So under those circumstances, I believe that we can go forward and call out moments of rhetoric that tells us that these people aren't respecting us as humans. I also, during the course of the lockdown, was really worried about people using terms like they felt that an argument about whether or not it was all right to tell somebody they couldn't do their ethnic background as their persona was virtue flagging, which drove me crazy. And also social justice warrior was really worrisome to me. Why would I be feeling badly about taking care of other people? If we're part of a group society, if we came together to create a better place, why wouldn't we take care of our members? And how is that form of being a warrior any less important? I mean, when I was made a laurel and when I was made a viscountess, I took the same oath that chivalry takes. And I meant it, and I mean it to this day. And sometimes that means to speak and not be silent. And that has been very, very hard, because there hasn't seemed to be very many places to safely do that. Does anybody have anything they'd like to add? Any questions about where my argument has gone? Any experiences that you felt strongly about? I'm completely ready to talk about that.
I will want to second or 1,000th everything that you've said there. I saw recently, and I wish I could find it again because it was going to be more eloquently than I'm going to put it, but I'm going to try to paraphrase as well I could, that something that had scrolled by on Facebook, that it was like not just a thumbs up, but give the heart to. And it basically is that interactions with people involve a social contract of mutual respect. And when someone expresses intolerance, they are breaking that contract. And having broken that contract, when you express an intolerance of their broken part of the contract, it is not you who has broken the contract.
Yeah, absolutely. I have just found that I see conversations getting tricked into devolving from the thing that that started it, the first complaint, the first thing that was seen that was wrong or hurtful or dangerous. And then it becomes an argument about whether or not you're intolerant for not wanting it. And then it becomes about you, which is just completely disarming the entire point of that discussion. So now we are no longer talking about how to diffuse what happened, how to make sure it doesn't happen again, whether or not that's something that's actually policy in the SCA or one person acting out in a random way. We can't go there now, because all we're going to argue about is whether or not the person who was hurt is a hypocrite. And then we start to have an argument about whether or not they have a right to feel hurt. So we've just evolved to victim blaming, and we have not done anything. So that is something that whenever I see somebody else saying, posting something saying that they see this happening, I always feel heartwarmed that somebody else is seeing it. But I also worry that we don't have any place to go. Even if we don't have an opportunity to turn it into something that we're going to push forward as a policy of some kind, at least a place to go and not feel like you're standing alone screaming into the abyss. And I think that the just creating offices that are involved with diversity and inclusion is a huge first step. And I've been really excited about seeing it. I also want to think about and put out there that I feel like there have to be steps to making changes. And I found a breakdown of how to deal with this kind of stuff in particular. I went through a lot of research and came to this so that we can start to move forward with stuff that I feel is actually just a systemic problem within the SCA, which is perfectly reflected in our government recently. We started this as a group of friends who all liked the same thing and got together to do this thing. And no one ever thought for an instant that they were going to have to tell their friends that they weren't doing it right, or that maybe they had let something slide that shouldn't have let slide. We just don't have a lot of great internal systems to make sure that people who use hate speech or symbols of hate speech or any of those things can be nipped in the bud, because we didn't think about it. And so now getting them passed seems to frequently create more of those weird circular arguments where it becomes more about the people who say, hey, why don't we do this, than it is about what the content is. Like, who's gonna argue that a Nazi's a bad idea? Pretty much nobody. But somehow when you want to make an argument about what is okay to put on a shield, it devolves immediately about people's freedoms and oppression. And what I would like is for my Jewish grandmother to show up to an SCA event and not be completely triggered to escaping Russia. I mean, that's just not a lot to ask, especially about a thing that happened within people's memories, their lifetimes now. I mean, there are still people with tattoos on their arms. And I'm frequently hearing arguments about reclaiming symbols of an ancient origin and being told while it's happening that it happened before I was born. Why can't I shut up about it?
I've gotten sucked into those conversations as well. And I had my response to that was like, a symbol in and of itself has no meaning. The only meaning it has is what's been attached to it by the behavior of people. Yeah. Okay, so let's talk about this symbol. And for a long time, there was an awful lot of people all over the different cultures and everything who at a low level were connected with this symbol.
Right.
Okay, now we come to the 1930s, and some of the most heinous and evil behaviors that have ever occurred on this planet are associated with that symbol from then till today and beyond. Here's my question to you. You want to claim this, you're going to have to be able to produce under that symbol enough good and enough positivity to overcome that. You think you can do that within a kind of like time frame of days, because if you can't do it in a time frame of days, you're not going to be able to do it at all, because you've got to overturn that much evil, that much hate. And that won't happen as long as that much evil and that much hate are going forward.
Right, exactly. And more
If you try to do a small little bit here, it makes no difference. You have to, in an instant, reclaim all of the good that you can possibly put into that symbol instantly. Good luck.
well, and the other thing is that other cultures who had that symbol during the 40s, the Hopi people gave up their sun symbol
Yeah.
publicly because it looks like a swastika. So they never used it again. They changed their symbol, a symbol they had had for 1,000 years, and they gave it up. I don't want to have an argument with an adult about whether or not they get to use it, and my grandmother should just shut up. Yes, Nisa.
Yeah. It's not just about your grandmother, Uta. It's people don't realize. I mean, not everybody realizes that. I just looked up to make sure. Intergenerational trauma can last for 7 generations of people. So you're the second generation, the third generation after your grandmother, who was, and it's still in our body memories as well as our family history. So there's no reason for it. And I love your argument, Teleanor, about it. Like that, if you can't prove enough good, stop using it.
It's not even prove enough good, it's create enough good.
Create enough good.
And do it in a way that can overbalance the evil, which must be done instantaneously, because the evil, you'll never be able to tip the scales a little drip at a time.
No,
Right.
never. I really didn't want to just talk at people this whole time, but I went ahead and I read a book that I really, really thought was great, How to Be an Anti-Racist, which is not showing up. Oh, there it is.
Yeah.
And it's primarily, it's from the point of view of a young Black man an adult male Black man who grew up in the United States, and their parents were activists for equality, and he grew up in a household full of people who were acting and doing all the time, building. And he went through his own phases as a young person about how he connected to that and how he didn't connect to that. But his outline and a few of the things he said, which really helped me in my experience with really uncomfortable conversations in person, and also some stuff online since the lockdown, about views I heard and things that were said offline to me, about my insistence about the swastika in particular. And that, so what, the man's name is Abram Kendi, and Abram, in his 11 steps of how to change, and he says specifically racism, but at the heart of all white supremacy is misogyny and racism. Like, that's just a given, that's happening. And the very first thing is that you have to be able to admit that racial inequality is a problem of bad policy and not bad people. And one of the things that made it so hard was people who I had admired and trusted said some things I could not believe. And then after they had said them, they told me that I had hurt them because I had expressed that I no longer trusted them. So, and I wasn't sure. I mean, so you've expressed that you think people like me are not as important as people like you, and yet our relationship is somehow supposed to be different, and I'm supposed to trust you that you would never throw me under a bus. That's just insane. Nobody can do that. It's like, And all the times that stuff happens, you're an okay Black person, or you're the nice gay man, or you're what the fuck? We just can't be doing that. And we can't be accepting those explanations, but I can accept that people who have benefited by being able to be at the top of a heap can feel like everybody getting the same start is oppression. And I don't have to hate them. Yes, Ainsley. You have
you can finish what you were saying before I speak. Go ahead.
I can see that if you've always been ahead, and then suddenly everybody's like, oh no, everyone's going to stand on the same level, it can look scary. It can look like we're saying you don't get to be who you've been, or you don't get to do what you've been doing. But people can have the same things. It's not pie. There's enough for everyone to be treated as a human being. But if you've been raised in a way that makes you feel that everyone having the same opportunity is dangerous to what you have, that's a lot to overcome. And those blind spots can be there as part of a human being who you've cared for, and then you suddenly find out that this is part of their makeup. And there are ways to work around it, because no matter what we do, we're not going to change everybody's backgrounds, but we can move forward with how we deal with it. Ainsley, please.
I was just gonna say, sorry I haven't spoken up before now. I've been driving and couldn't easily unmute. So something you were saying earlier about the whole, no politics in the SCA, people not wanting politics, just drives me crazy. Like, I went to an event last year where a friend invited me to join her camp, and they had a sign up that said no politics allowed. And like, somebody actually expressed to a member of that camp, like, I don't know if I'm safe in this place as a minority person, because that's such a privileged position that
Right.
Like, it's just this attitude that like, if you're saying we shouldn't get into politics, that means that you are a person who has the privilege to not be involved in politics. Like, I am a queer woman and a disabled person, and those are three identities that have been politicized.
Mhm.
And it wasn't us that politicized them. It was straight people and men and abled people, and it was white people who politicized skin color. And there was the people who oppress us, who decided that our identities are political. And then they tell us, but don't talk about it. That's not appropriate conversation, for this space. And it makes me so angry, because like, my entire identity is politicized. And if you tell me no politics, you're telling me that who I am is not welcome in your space.
Or that you're discussing it, and that you're discussing it is inconvenient to them.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Yeah, I'm so sorry. I don't go into camps that have that sign, because it spontaneously makes me want to scream at them. My physical well-being, you don't get to fucking vote on. This just should not be a problem. And yet it gets sucked under politics, because they want to be able to make their own decisions and not face the consequences. And they don't want to look at people who they are friendly with, but apparently wouldn't lift a finger to help. And that's a hard thing to find out about people you're camping next door to. I'm really sorry. The politics thing in the SCA really upsets me, because I'm wondering what their definition is. Like, politics is how we decide who lives and dies.
Yeah.
So I feel like everybody should be involved. And when you tell us we can't be, or when you vote us out of it, then you're just taking away our voices.
Well, plus we say that the SCA is the Middle Ages as it should have been. which is a political statement to say that the Middle Ages had issues of how they treated certain groups of people and that we're not going to be like that. And so that in and of itself is political. So we can't take the politics out of the SCA.
Right. No, absolutely not. And my feeling is we shouldn't, and we should be honest and open about what we do. I just feel that there's been so much just hoping it will go away. Like I've seen good, smart, capable, well-meaning people just quit coming because the arguments were too ugly. And I've had a really hard time myself knowing how much I can handle because of some of the conversations I had while we were all trapped in our homes. And I love this place and I don't want to be driven out. And I also feel like if we walk away, that it's just gonna be everything I hate. And it was everything I love. And I don't want to be the person who walked away. And one of the great things about Abrams' how to be an anti-racist is he gives an 11-step plan for how to instigate policy change. And I feel like it's super proactive and absolutely doable. But like all things, and I'm gonna post it so we can all see it. Like all things, it's just really time consuming and it'll wear you down. Like this is a fight that has to be had, but it's hard. And it's not like anything's easy right now. Like everything that's important to me and everyone I love identifies as a person who's part of a group that is actively being targeted right now. And I do feel overwhelmed on occasion, but I also feel like the SCA is a microcosm started by a whole lot of sci-fi writers, half of whom at the time were not out queer, but were queer, and lots of women to men. And they all got together and managed to start this thing originally as just a party, but it became much more. And when I joined, it had its issues. It always will. There will always be individuals who behave shitty, but it was a haven in my world where I could just go and be my geekiest self. And it was really helpful and lovely. And I want that to go forward. And I guess that means that I'm going to be spending the time to try to enforce some level of policy changes. And I'm still sort of shocked that during the course of this last year, we have never officially come out flat out and said that we would not allow any hate group speech at all, period. We've danced around it, but we're not just doing it, just saying it out loud. And I feel like that's because there's a loud enough group of people who say, oh, well, that's modern politics. And people don't want to argue and they buckle. And I want there to be a line in the sand and a place where we can use as a bulwark to step back behind people who think the same way and take a break while they step up and fight for a little bit. So you can come back out and fight when when your soul is filled again, because the anger and the rage and the misogyny is so intense and it's so heavy. And I'm looking for a way to build that space so that we can step out from behind the bulwark and argue and make our points and press our policies and then step back and get what we need so that it's worth going on.
Right.
Does anybody have any feelings about that?
I feel like I want to tell you a little bit of my journey, not necessarily the SCA journey, but the what was the word you used, generational trauma that you used earlier,
That was
from sort of the flip side of that exact same coin. I grew up in the barony of the Cleflands, which is Cleveland, Ohio. It's you know, a northern industrial city in a state that that was not part of the Deep South.
Mhm.
And yet the Ku Klux Klan has had like 3 cycles. The first one was immediately following the Civil War. The second one started in Midwest industrialized cities like Detroit, Chicago, Pittsburgh, Cleveland. And so I grew up in as white an environment as you could possibly imagine. My family was, you know, middle class, you know, suburban as it gets. My high school had 4,000 students. It was rather massive. We had 2 people of color. They were a pair of brothers who'd moved in from Brazil, and boy, could they play soccer,
Yeah.
you know. And I can't remember a time in my household where I heard the words person of color or a Jewish or Italian or Polish, because they were all replaced by very derogatory words that I will not use. And I came to, oh, and of course, you know, queer folk of any variety was, you know, layers of extremely deep derogatory terminology. And I came to a point where I had to come out about myself to myself. And at that point, it's like, I'd never felt like it was appropriate to do these things, but I never felt that it was particularly off the charts because they were everywhere.
Mhm.
It's off the charts. It really is. It should never be done. It should never have been done. Even today, I occasionally see something or hear something, and I have to exercise the words of my old man out of my head, you know, make that N word go away. I never want to hear it again. So the question I would really love to ask is, how do I get rid of that entirely? And the answer is you never will. It's part of that generational trauma that's going on. It's from the perspective of the bully, not the perspective of the bullied. And so the question that I do bring up is, from that position of deep privilege, I mean, if I really get right down to it, where can I make a difference? The differences that you talked about earlier, you know, at a political larger scale level, you know, I don't know that that any one of us can do that. We have to do that as a group. I have seen, when living in Texas, literally laws being broken in the polling places by the people who were election judges and running the polling places. And when I asked the county, you know, how that could be stopped, their answer was, well, if there's only one party running it, then there's nobody that's you know, seeing it from the other side. You need somebody from the other party to have a voice as well. Okay, fine. But you know, how do we do this as enough of a, with enough of a voice? What is enough of a voice?
Yeah. I that was part of what I wanted to, we don't have a specific spot right now where we can all go forward with that as a thing. Like, there's no meetings that I know of or any gatherings, but I feel like that is a thing that we need to start making happen. And I don't believe that we're going to make a lot of big changes in the way other people feel until we make some changes in policy in the SCA itself about what is tolerated and what is not tolerated. We can only, just like I so much more than you might need to know about me, but we're going to go there really quickly. So I recently, in the last part of my life, started having individual therapy, and I realized for the first time a few weeks ago that 90% of the stuff that I never did that I wanted to do in my life was completely powered by the voice in my head that is my interpretation of what my family was telling me is true about myself.
Same.
And I think that almost everybody has some version of that. And yours is going to include some derogatory statements. And mine, I thought, I mean, my grandfather he did all pro bono work for civil rights stuff. And I did not know that the word that he used to describe people of color is a derogatory one till I was 30. He still used the language. It was in Yiddish, but it was the language. And because it was Yiddish, nobody else used it. And I thought my grandfather was perfect. And he could simultaneously fight for somebody else's rights as a human being and still carry that seed with him and say it out loud in front of his grandchildren. So the work on other people is going to be slow because people have to own that it's valuable enough work to do. But we can absolutely, and not even so slow. It's not the same thing as voting in the government for, trying to change who's in the House or who's in the Senate. But we can move forward with just some basic policy stuff, like the fact that we don't have a flat out, if we find out that you're part of a hate group, you are out and it won't be discussed. We're a private organization. We've used our private organization status to do a lot of stuff, but hardly any of it has been to protect the weak and the voiceless. That's come hard and slow. But in truth, there's more people who would fall under not feeling safe around white supremacists and racists than there are people who aren't. And we should be able to change that. So we might want to pick something different than what I just said, but I think that we should start with just a first push, because there are enough of us and everyone deserves to feel safe and valued and not part of an organization that's through apathy and fear, not living up to their potential. They all took that goddamn oath, just like I did. And I want them to stand. Anybody have any feelings?
What you just said there triggered two really amazing epiphanies in my head. And one of them actually goes back a little further from what you said, and I didn't tie them together till now. One of the things that I kind of give you the background of my family, and I can remember my father over and over and over and over and over and over again being, I'm a libertarian because I believe that everybody should have the equal ability to go ahead. And that ties in with what you said way earlier on about who is this everybody you speak of? Does it include women? Does it include people of color? Does it include? And in his mind, no. And I look at my brothers and my sisters, and they have not had to go through the introspection it takes to be one of the targeted groups that our parents, well, at least one of them, was being so derogatory to, and realized the falseness of that. So, I mean, otherwise really decent people, but how do you get them to the point where they realize the falseness of what they've been taught generationally? And so two big epiphanies in just less than a minute with you.
Most people don't make changes unless what's going on makes them uncomfortable. And I can't make them more introspective, and I can't hold their hands while they suffer through the idea that maybe people they love taught them things that were not good. But I can make them uncomfortable. And that's the first step for all of it. When you realize something that's an old habit that was useful, maybe it was a survival technique, is now just hindering your ability to be close to people you love, you change the way you behave. When you isolate effectively 90% of the planet, just the pool of talent and ability you're refusing to listen to. Are you going to eat hot dogs and mayonnaise for the rest of your life? Are you going to live on an island where, you never have any change ever? It has to be exactly the way you saw it when you were a child. You need more of an intellect to get through the world. And the closer we get to each other, the more you need to be thinking and accepting and discarding things that don't work and moving into things that do work. And the only way we can enforce anything is just by saying this thing that you're participating in cuts out all these other people as valid people in our organization. So you can't be part of this organization until you are prepared to step in and take into account that these are all humans and that we're involved. Yes, Ainsley, go. I'm sorry.
Oh no, you don't have to apologize. I just something that's so hard for me isn't so much the people who hold those bigoted opinions, because I encounter that every day in my work and deal with it. It's the moderates who just don't care. It's the ones who think that both sides have valid points and that we should all just agree to disagree, and they just don't care. And they think that there is space for white supremacy, and that, they're like, it just like so I'm not neurodivergent, and one of the things that has come out of that I've realized is I have that really strong sense of justice and that need to do something when I see something wrong. And even amongst people who claim to have more progressive ideals, they still just don't care and don't want to do anything about it because it's too much work and it doesn't really affect them. And it just drives me crazy, because like my brain is just like, how can you not care that people are hurting just because it doesn't affect you? And like, I think that's the bigger problem in the SCA, because there is white supremacy, but it makes up a pretty small portion. It's all the people who think that it's fine to have it there, who don't necessarily hold those beliefs, but don't see a problem with sitting beside people who do.
Yeah, I my brain is on fire at the thought of injustice in my view. Like, I just can't. I can't. And I know, and I'm a little I'm neurodivergent, and I never talk about it, but I am, and I never knew that was a trait that might be added to by that. But if you cannot say that some other person sitting next to you thinking that the person across from you with their children is not quite as human as they are is a horrible thing, then you are one of the people who needs to be uncomfortable. I want everybody like that to have to say out loud, yeah, I see that we're saying that people who don't believe these people are human should not be part of our organization, but I'm going to withhold judgment. Because I want them to have to say it out loud and live through that interaction. It's just too easy. It doesn't affect them because nobody ever calls them on it. And I want to. I don't want to hurt people. I want to actually just make a safe space for everybody. But you don't get to sit on some high horse and imagine. That's like when people want to argue about whether or not abortion is healthcare. It's crazy. A woman's body's designed, regardless of how they plan on using it, around their organs because they're likely to get pregnant. So all of these things that happen for us every month, regardless of whether we want to be in it or out of it, are constantly affecting our well-being. And they want to mess with what kind of hormones we can have and can't have, how we choose to take care of our sex organs, like all of that's something that's arguable. It's not arguable. It's not politics, biology. Stand over there. So yeah, and I'm getting late and I should probably get off. I'm gonna post the 11 steps towards making a change politically within our organization. And I would like to put together a place that we can get together and talk if we want to be a part of a group that's kind of moving forward with something. And even if we don't, even if you're not ready, even if you're just tired, I want to have a place where people can come and talk about that, so that when they go back out and have a conversation, that they know that they've got support waiting for them to come home to. So I'm going to get on that, and we'll make other posts on this forum.
Thank you, Uta.
Thank you, Uta. I'm going to end the video now.